had a conversation with a friend the other day about social media and social media algorithms, and his perspective was social media companies are predatory in how they can make people addicted to their platforms and how they can make their algorithms so persuasive and catered to a user that a person really has no power to say no to opening up their phone and going on social media and spending hours scrolling through it. Where I was coming from, where I was understanding, is that the decision to open your phone, to go onto this app, is a decision that you are making. Without understanding how decisions are made or how to make conscious decisions, it can feel like you have no choice in that situation, that you have to go with what these companies want or what's cool, what's popular to do, which is going on social media, being on social media. But it is your decision to keep the app on your phone, to log in every day, to go through it. That's one example that illustrated the sense of powerlessness that I think people can convince themselves of, or believe that they are powerless, believe that they don't have agency in the things that they do and how they spend their time.
That is an excellent example of using the power thought and not understanding that power inside. Using it at a lower level of consciousness. What level do they understand? They are using their power, mind, thought, consciousness, and their free will to push that button and go on to social media. This is coming from inside and how I'm choosing to use my power. The outside is the social media. The outside is the digital device. Inside is mind, thought, consciousness. Inside is the power thought. Inside are the thoughts or level of understanding that is being created with one's power, because his level of understanding was low, because his decision was less conscious. He was investing in a thought. Something outside of him has more control over his behavior and his decisions than him. That's a misunderstanding of how we work inside. When your friend was talking about social media having control and being less powerful or being powerless, that is a thought. That is an imaginary idea that that person was creating inside their head with their power called thought. To understand, it is an illusionary idea that they are creating and they're experiencing in their head. That is a greater level of self-awareness. That is a greater level of mental health. That is understanding more the power thought inside, how it works, and that they're using it. That's just one thing, creating the thought. Next step is either listening to the thought or believing the thought, or staying focused on whatever was going on in live time. That is another micro decision that people are doing in live time. That person is using their power to believe the thought he or people are powerless over social media algorithms. Well, your friend is very powerful. The bottom line is for him to understand he was using his power to invest in an illusionary idea that he was powerless. And it's not even the ideas in his head. It's the believing it. It's the buying into it less consciously. That's a less conscious decision, that he is choosing to believe this made-up imaginary thought, this subjective level of awareness. It is human beings individually using their power less consciously that the collective starts copying each other's behavior or believing each other's thoughts, or believing the thought that the problem is the social media algorithm. The more they invest at next levels in understanding thought and how they're using it and how it works and what what they can be doing when they're experiencing these thoughts. People are going to listen to their innate wisdom in live time, and they're going to make more conscious decisions whether to go on that social media, how long to go on that social media, how to navigate that social media.
Yeah. I've been seeing a lot of doctors. I've had quite a few appointments talking about BRCA, and there's a statistic that I hear a lot, which is the statistic that 60% of people-ish with BRCA develop breast cancer in their lives. I remember the first time I heard the statistic, my genetic counselor was positioning this fact in a fearful way, where she was saying, like, BRCA is a very serious thing. It can be very scary because 60% of people that have it develop breast cancer. I started asking her questions just in the interest of genuinely understanding what she was saying. I was asking her where this number come from, what was this test that was conducted? I'm really interested in understanding this test. And she said it came from a national board, some research study that they proposed. And then I asked her, did this statistic account for smokers, people that drink a lot? What demographic was this statistic coming from? She couldn't give an answer for that. What I'm understanding now, as we're talking about the collective and your level of understanding, was that she was seeing the statistic that 60% of people with BRCA develop breast cancer, and instead of understanding that statistic at a deeper level to more accurately inform what she was telling to her patients, she was just believing what a collective posited as the truth. Because what I was trying to understand was how many of the women that were tested in this study were at higher risk of developing cancer for lifestyle choices, because that can be a big cause. I had a lot of smokers in my family, and that's what I understand as part of where a lot of their cancer diagnoses came from.
To take that a step further, what is behind them smoking cigarettes? That's a level of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Those are decisions. How conscious are those decisions? Sometimes people smoke because they're feeling anxious, because they're feeling stressed. So they pick up the cigarette to distract themselves or to alleviate the stressful feeling inside. That's a lower level of mental health. Sometimes these behaviors, these less healthy behaviors, are ways to alleviate stress inside.
Mm-hmm.
In the case, more and more people study at next levels, mind, thought, consciousness, and cultivate more mental health, it is possible that these high-risk behaviors that are leaned on, that are resorted to alleviate insecurity inside, a busy mind, stress, and they take the steps inside to self-regulate, to let their mind clear and calm down from facts about how mind, thought, consciousness works. It is possible some of these high-risk behaviors, and I'm going to even say it's going to be likely because I've seen it in patients where they stop doing these high-risk behaviors because they're experiencing less stress inside because how they're more consciously using their mind.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go to the next level. When we experience stress, our heart rate is elevated, we have tension in our body, our breathing is more shallow. We could go to next levels in experiencing healthier psychological states, which then would lead to healthier biological states, where now at a whole nother level, we're eliminating or reducing very serious illnesses such as cancer. I'm not saying it's going to eliminate all cancer, but it is possible, even more than possible, likely, that some of these cancers that have been happening could greatly reduce. Even if they've reduced some, that would still be progress. It is important that these studies look at this at a finer grade level and not just clump all of this together, that it's a result of the BRCA revision that this cancer is happening. It is important that you ask questions so your level of awareness could increase inside, so that you could make more conscious decisions from innate wisdom how to navigate this revision that you have inside. And that is a great example how she was exposed to this material. I don't know if it was in a scientific study or in one of her textbooks. Because it was in one of those places, she just started, it sounded like she just started believing this thought that was written on some page somewhere, when she could have been using her mind more consciously to understand it at next levels. Welcome. So glad you joined us today. This is Got Your Back podcast, all things mental health from leading edge mental health facts. This is mental health crash course number 1, knowing you are doing the right thing. I'm Faith, your host. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, licensed school psychologist, licensed special ed teacher.
I'm your junior host, Ellie. I have been a client of mental health counseling for the past 2 years, and I'm now living and working in Boston.
Decisions is one of the fundamental uses of our power. We do have power inside. To be able to move any part of your body, power is behind that. To be able to think, to be able to feel, power is behind that. In fact, the feeling inside in live time is the current state of the power inside, which is mind. It's actually been estimated scientifically that a human being makes approximately 35,000 decisions a day. A decision is, in any moment, the direction we decide to head in our life. Do you have any thoughts around this, Ellie? As far as when you've been in mental health counseling, has your understanding of decisions grown at all, and in what way?
It definitely has grown. I feel like before I started mental health counseling, I would experience a lot of anxiety around decisions. I would make a lot of decisions that, looking back on it now, I can see I made them from less secure states of mind. So I can trace a lot of decisions I've made before I started mental health counseling that I was really nervous to make, I was really scared about making, or I was really overconfident in making them. You can see a lot of examples of those decisions not being necessarily the most conscious thing to do in that moment. So I would say my relationship with decision making has definitely shifted to being a lot simpler after pursuing mental health counseling. I feel like I can make decisions from a much more secure and grounded place. I am more sure that's the right thing to do. I'm more comfortable with making decisions and knowing that they're the right thing to do.
A basic example, a starting place with decisions. We can look at a child who is sick and they've been prescribed medicine. That medicine is in the form of a pill. It's important for them to take the medicine to get well, to heal the illness inside. The human being, in this case the child, is using their free will. We have all been given free will. And in live time, they could be biologically looking at the pill and saying, I don't want to take that pill. Potentially, they're scared of choking, or they don't like the idea of swallowing the pill. Those are just possibilities. Maybe their mood is low because they feel really sick and they're less likely to cooperate. The conscious decision in that moment is, what is the right thing to do? It's not only asking ourselves that question, what is the right thing to do, but it's also seeing from clarity inside, which is a state of mind, which is a level of awareness, which is a particular feeling inside. And so when we ask the question, what is the right thing to do, notice how there's no I or me in it. The question itself is inherently impersonal. The question is inherently more of an open mind. It more inherently lends itself to seeing from an objective level of awareness. When I say objective, I mean seeing the facts. To make it more clear, when the answer is originating from an objective level of understanding, from facts, we feel the feeling of clarity. We feel grounded inside. It's simple and it's apparent to us.
Faith, with the example of a sick child taking medicine, can we break down what the right thing to do is in that situation versus what a less conscious perspective is?
Sure.
I'm just really curious about the idea of the right thing to do, since in my experience, the right thing to do when I was not as mentally healthy, I had a lot of conventional wisdom ideas about the right thing to do.
Why don't you give an example to help us understand?
Yeah, and we can talk about this more in later conversations in this podcast, but I used to go out partying a lot on weekdays, on weeknights that weren't necessarily the wisest decision, since I would have work or I'd have responsibilities the next morning. And from my perspective, I was often convincing myself that I was doing the right thing because I had these ideas about being in college and being young and having fun as being the most important thing, and having experiences with my friends and whatever I was believing about college at that time. So from that perspective and from that level of awareness about decisions and about the right thing to do, I was convincing myself that what I wanted was the right thing to do, or what I believed I wanted, if that makes sense.
How do you know you were convincing yourself? There was something happening inside where you understood you were convincing yourself. What was that?
The first signal that I was convincing myself was that there was a lot of insecurity attached to the decisions. Like when I made those decisions, I would really be beating myself up in my head sometimes with worry and stress about the responsibilities I had. I often made those decisions out of fear of being left out or not being included in an experience with my friends. I would say my first signal that I was convincing myself of the right thing to do was that when I would make those decisions, I was never really living in a good feeling. So
what do you mean by a good feeling? Could you please elaborate?
There's always something inside of me that, and at the time I didn't realize what it was, but it was just this little nudge, this little feeling inside like something wasn't quite right. Versus now, when I just graduated college, but I've recently-ish had decisions where I had to pick between going out or staying in and studying for a test, and I can tell when I decide to stay in and study for my test how much more secure that feels, how much better I feel the next day physically and psychologically, how much it's just that feeling of responsibility, like I'm taking care of what I need to take care of, what I'm responsible for. I'm meeting all of the responsibilities that I agreed to take on by going to college, by studying for this exam.
What I hear you saying is you're understanding more, that you are seeing from clarity inside now as you make those decisions. And what it is it's simpler, it's clearer, it's just,
Not
it's almost
thinking as much.
Yeah, to me, it's apparent in a very simple way. There isn't a lot of thinking going on. There isn't a lot of guesswork going on. There's not a lot of hedging or conflict going on inside or tension going on inside. The other thing that really hit me when you were speaking was before, your energy and effort was more in what you were seeing when you were using your power thought as you were making decisions. It was more literal. It was more surface level, where you were very engaged with creating with the power thought. Should I go out? Shouldn't I go out? I'll be missing this if I don't go out. I really want to do this. Whereas now you look beyond that surface level. This is what I'm seeing you were saying. You can correct me in the case I'm misunderstanding. But as you were talking, what was coming through was you're going to the next level, looking at it simply. You're not so caught up on that literal level of whatever ideas that you're creating with your power called thought, and just seeing that, just going with that. You're pausing, you're listening to the feeling, you're looking beyond at least a little bit with what you're creating with thought. It's almost like a gardener planting these flowers, and you're just putting the seeds in the soil. Or before you put the seeds in the soil, you're taking more time looking at the soil. What is the condition of the soil? Is it dry? Does it need more moisture? Does it need more fertilizer? Is it in a shady area? Is it in a sunny area? It's just a metaphor where there's levels of awareness when we're doing something. What level of awareness are we doing it from? That is the power of mental health counseling that I provide, is we go beyond the surface level. I look at, where are you seeing from? What feeling are you living in? How are you using thought? It's more looking at the source of where my decision is originating from, or what is a decision. I've always been that way as a mental health counselor, but learning 3 principles psychology allowed me to go there more. It was a science that resonated with looking at the source of the origin of my perspective in lifetime. Is it coming from the personal? Is it coming from a conditioned habit with using my operating system? Or is it coming from looking at how I'm using my operating system, the feeling I'm living in, and then understanding more what is the validity of this thought, of this decision?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on what I'm saying?
No, I think it's definitely true. I was actually thinking about going back to the sick child example to illustrate this, where I'm seeing a lot more clearly now that for the child to say, I don't want to take this pill, so they don't take it, it's a very clear example of letting that surface level thinking, as you were saying, steer you the wrong way, since it's pretty clear that if a sick child doesn't take the medicine, they won't feel better. They might be sicker for longer. Their sickness might get worse. It might progress more. I'm seeing a lot more about how, like, the right thing to do in that situation isn't necessarily what the child's parent wants for them or what the child wants to do. The right thing to do is very simply, the child is sick. They need to take medicine. I think the thing that's really resonating with me is how simple it is to make decisions, or how much simpler it is once you understand more about mind, thought, consciousness, and innate wisdom. And I think that was something I was missing in when you asked me before about my relationship with decisions before and after mental health counseling. I think the biggest difference is how much less I think about decisions and how much more simply and clearly things come to me, and how much better I feel making decisions from that place. Because I really would think a lot. Like, even just the example about going out to a party, it's like the less conscious thinking about everything was so complicated. Like, I was really thinking about, in just deciding to go out for one night, I was thinking about college and what it means to be in college and what it means to have friends and your relationship with your friends and all this stuff to convince myself to go out or not. Versus now, it's just a very clear, I have a test tomorrow. I perform better when I study and get good sleep. It makes sense to not go out tonight.
What I hear you describing is, with a lower level of self-awareness, with a lower level of mental health, you would use the power thought extensively. Number one, it's an energy guzzler. Number two, it's a time guzzler. Basically, you're just like living in your head a lot. You're just experimenting and roaming around metaphorically, psychologically with this power thought, just creating all of this thinking, all of these ideas, where now with a greater level of mental health, with a greater level of self-awareness that you cultivated, now it's less about what you're thinking, and it's more about looking at the feeling you're living in or how you're using the power thought. So you're looking at that next level, looking more at the roots of where this is coming from, this thinking, these ideas, this feeling. That's going deeper. It's more of a vertical looking at it, a more looking behind the scenes. You use less energy inside, you use less time, and it's something that is practical across all decision making. I wanted to step back just a little bit. Decision making, I saw some time ago, was a pivotal thing to learn as I was digging deeper into 3 principles psychology as a licensed mental health counselor. It started hitting me that when individuals understand more how conscious decision making works, the steps to take inside, it eliminates a lot of problems and gets you on track a lot faster. I'm saying this sincerely. I saw from innate wisdom inside the importance of decision making. So part of my work as a psychologist, as a science of mental health, was I became very interested in digging deeper and deeper into conscious decision making, wise decision making. And we're talking from the impersonal. That's lent itself to people making fundamental changes how they see life. It just from situation to situation, you're just more able to independently take better care of yourself. For example, that child, they're young. They're not expected to know the right thing to do. The adults around them, fully grown beings who have had opportunities develop biologically and psychologically, it is their responsibility to steer that young child that's learning how to navigate the world. It could be a very normal thing that the child says, I don't want to take that pill. They could be experimenting with their own power and how their own power works and standing their ground. They could be in a low mood because they're sick and they don't feel like swallowing or eating. They could be doing something with their power thought where somehow they're creating fears around taking that pill. That's not the point. The point is the people that are more biologically developed, that have had time to evolve as human beings psychologically, it's their duty to guide that child to take optimal care of themselves, to teach them how to make conscious decisions. So it's not about what we want to do. That's from the personal. That's from the subjective. When we look from what we want to do, the way we're using thought, we're only seeing pieces of the situation. So when we're making a decision from the personal, we are unaware in many cases what the facts are. And so we're making this less conscious decision because we have a lower level of awareness inside. We don't understand the direction we're taking our life in or the effects it's having on other human beings around us. In this case, it's possible the parents could say he or she or they don't want to, so we're not going to make them. I have an inner knowing from inside, from innate wisdom, from the impersonal, from facts, from clarity, using my mind more consciously, that it's really important that that child needs to learn to look in the direction of doing the right thing and seeing beyond what she wants to do. Learning to see beyond a low mood or anxious thinking or resistance or ego or wherever it's coming from. They also, for them to develop healthier habits and taking care of themselves, all of these are important aspects to doing the right thing. Facilitating providing guidance for that child to learn these things. Decision making, it's two parts. It's in lifetime using your gift free will. You get to choose your decisions. You get to choose how to use your power, which is mind. That's the living power inside. The other part of that is, what is my perspective? Hence my level of awareness inside when I'm making those decisions. How much am I seeing the facts or the ramifications when I make a decision this way, the impact it's having on my life or those around me? And that's an important thing to understand. We can take it to the next level and look at something a little more complex or complicated when making conscious decisions. What's your thoughts so far, Ellie? What are you seeing?
Yeah. The thing that was really resonating with me was the idea of, in the context of parenthood, how much responsibility a parent has to guide their child to understand these things, and how limited that guidance is when a parent doesn't really understand decision making for themselves. And I was thinking of an example. I remember talking to my mom once about how I was raised, and she said something like, I wanted you to be able to make your own decisions, so I would let you pick out your clothes. And it was, as you're talking, hitting me how much that was focused on the outside, teaching me how to make decisions on the outside, or physically giving me the option to choose, but not necessarily understanding how to make those decisions on the inside, where it's understanding, like, you know, what is best to wear right now? What's the weather like? What are we doing today? Instead of just, what do I want to wear? And so that was an example that kind of popped into my head as you were talking.
The metaphor that's coming to my mind is, you can allow a child to pick an exercise class or pick a movie, so they get to exercise their free will. That's what I hear was being focused on in those moments with your mom, is allowing you to exercise your free will. But then there is the knowledge how and why to do it. And that's the inside, what you were talking about. Like, when you're exercising your free will, when you're exercising the power you have inside, are there any conscious steps? Are there any important steps to understand when you're doing that? That's all inside. You said it clearly in an excellent way. That's what I've been uncovering the science more via the three principles, is there are steps inside to take with your free will when you are using your power consciously. For example, long before I understood this science, I had this thinking about how I didn't like cold weather and how I didn't like to be cold. I would somehow avoid cold weather. As I was using my operating system more consciously, I was learning that the outside could be a cold temperature. And on the outside, my biology could be communicating it's a cold temperature with chills, with numbness. On the inside, how I was using the operating system in response to my body communicating chills or numbness. I was understanding the right thing for me to do in this moment is put more clothing on, or put specific clothing on. It's not necessarily thicker layering, it's more fabrics that are made for cold weather. And it really changed how, I biologically experienced the cold weather, but also psychologically how I viewed and then responded to it. And it took me to such a level that at one point I started doing winter hiking every year. I got to experience New England in some of its most beautiful natural settings, to be up in the mountains or in the woods. Everything would be outlined in this beautiful white color. In winter hiking, there's no bugs, you don't sweat. But it allowed me to have all these experiences with getting healthier and stronger during winter and meeting more people who were interested in being physically active outdoors. I would be outdoors a lot and I would be enjoying being outdoors a lot instead of being indoors and having cabin fever. I ended up with more knowledge about the inside through understanding and applying the science, and it totally flipped winter around for me from a psychological place inside. It's amazing when we understand more that we're creating a perspective in live time with our power thought. When we are responding to the outside, whether it's pain in our body, whether it's wintertime, whether it's someone saying they love us or they hate us, the perspective we're creating is merely a level of understanding. That's a super important thing to understand. And one of the reasons it's so important is it is from that level of understanding that we make decisions. And to understand that level of understanding could be objective facts, or is it coming from the personal? Is it coming from a conditioned habit with using my operating system? So when we make a decision from the facts, we're spot on with understanding what we need to understand and doing the right thing in those moments.
Is it possible to have more levels of understanding even when you're seeing from facts about a situation?
You
If that makes
can
sense.
keep having more realizations about that thing, which is seeing more and more of the facts about that thing. Yes, that's where knowledge is unlimited. A simple example is your level of knowledge at math in middle school hopefully is very different than your level of knowledge of math in high school. Hopefully it's even more different when you're in your undergraduate degree, college. Say you go to graduate school and you have to take any math classes or a PhD. All of those opportunities are you're cultivating more and more awareness, new levels of knowledge about math.
That makes sense.
We could be doing the same thing about our emotions inside, our perspectives, our power, decision making, relationships. It's unlimited how much knowledge we can cultivate and experience. And the more we do, things get simpler and simpler. Things are harder, more complex with less and less awareness about something.
I did have an example pop up in my head.
Sure.
A new one that we haven't talked about before. So I just kind of had a feeling that it was something that would be really important and interesting to talk about.
Sure.
But an example of a decision that has been very prevalent in my life has been picking a career, picking a college major. And this one's interesting because when I picked my college degree, I was not very mentally healthy. This was almost 5 years ago. Where I was seeing from at that place, it was the quote-unquote right thing to do from a less conscious place, or that was what I was convincing myself of before I understood what the right thing to do even meant.
Could I stop you for one moment? Could you, in that moment, when you saw it as the right thing to do, what feeling were you living in?
Fear. It was more so a decision made because I felt guilty or scared. And I want to talk a bit more about what I mean by that, or like where I'm coming from in bringing up this example. Because I had a conversation with a friend a while ago who also picked a STEM major, and I don't have enough facts to know if that's like what he is inclined to do or not, but we're having a conversation about why we picked our majors. And for me, at this point I just started therapy, so I was understanding why I picked my major at a different level, but he was talking about how he picked his major so that he could send money back to his family, get a job that makes a lot of money, and be able to provide for his family in the future and his, immediate family who sent him to college. And that was a similar mindset that I had when I picked my major. That was one of the things that I thought about, like making a lot of money, being able to provide, being able to be financially independent on my own. My question is if we could break that down for why that is or is not. Because the right thing to do, I think, when I was picking my major and I had these ideas about being financially independent and providing, in my head that was the right thing to do because I was being useful, or it was more of a service thing.
In what respect?
I'm giving back to my family. I'm providing for my family. I'm providing for a family that I might have in the future. So I'm curious if we could break down where that mentality fits into this idea of the right thing to do.
So this is one way I'm looking at it right now, or seeing it or understanding it as you speak, but there's other ways which we will get into. The first way is when I'm making a conscious decision, I'm asking a number of vital questions.
Mm-hmm.
For example, what is my passion, or what am I really good at? What am I meant to do? What is going to provide for me consistently with the economy or the direction the world is going in? What area is there going to be plenty of jobs in the future? But I'm trying to give you the notion or the understanding that you look at making a decision the middle of the wheel. The questions, the understanding are the spokes. You're allowing yourself to see more of the picture. You're allowing yourself to see more of the facts. But when you're asking these questions sincerely with a really open mind. You don't have thinking behind it already or mindsets behind it already. When you see it, it clicks in your head. You experience naturally this leap of awareness inside. When I heard you first talking, it was metaphorically the wheel, and the center of the wheel was, what major do I do in college? But I only heard one spoke being looked at, and that was the financial aspect. I didn't hear any other questions metaphorically of other spokes to get a full understanding. What is it that's best for me to major in, because this is going to be my career in the future? It's just looking at one aspect of this career. The facts aren't all being understood about what direction to go in with my life. You learned over time. Your learning style is the opposite. Biologically, the way you're built, your learning style is opposite of the career that you chose. That would have been one of the spokes in the wheel to ask, what am I really good at? What am I biologically built to do? That's from the inside, understanding, what am I going to thrive at? How am I going to contribute to the world in a way that my body and my mind has been designed to contribute to the world? You've talked about it in previous podcasts, not asking those questions, not understanding those facts. It was difficult for you to get through college. You were taking classes that was outside of how your brain is built to learn. And it lent itself to real turmoil, real psychological turmoil for you. Well, how can anybody thrive at a career that potentially they could make a lot of money, but yet they're not really built biologically, psychologically to do that thing? That doesn't make any sense. That's a lot of tension and pressure inside and a lot of heartache. The next thing is it's less about what the outside thinks. It's less about what my parents want or I want, money and promotions, or what the world expects of me. I give up any personal thinking or wants about it. I surrender to innate wisdom, that inner voice, that inner guidance system that's always going to steer me in the best direction. And I trust that because I'm learning about my authentic self. I'm cultivating my authentic self. When you come from that place and you're discovering you're built to do this thing and you love doing this thing. You're contributing to the world the way nature designed you to contribute to the world. I'm not making my decisions from conventional wisdom on the outside, from expectations, from current trends. For example, this whole AI thing, that's a current trend in our culture, or social media, that's a current trend in our culture. Those come and go. That's conventional wisdom. Just like years ago, conventional wisdom was everybody smokes cigarettes, basically. That's gone. Scientists found out how unhealthy that was for us. And thank goodness a lot of people have learned that. And as a result, a lot of people are or have done the right thing and have given up cigarette smoking. That's an example of a trend, conventional wisdom within a culture. That's people using their power thought less consciously, believing whatever they're making up and following or paying attention to the outside. That's how people make a lot of mistakes, or don't really get to know themselves, or don't end up marrying the person that's meant for them, or take good care of themselves. So what are you seeing now with what I said?
I'm understanding a lot more of where I was when I decided to go into this major, and how all of the decisions I made about understanding my major were not made consciously. To get more, maybe zoom out, big picture about picking my major, I'm seeing where that less conscious decision resulted in a whole bunch of outcomes that were not necessarily great for myself. I'm also thinking, like, for my classmates, the people that I worked with, when I wasn't really committed to our classes.
Could you give a couple examples, please?
I'm really talking about, like, the consequences of making a decision from a less conscious place. I'm seeing for myself how much I struggled, how much I really did not do what came to me. I'm also seeing where my professors, my peers that I was working with, how much I wasn't really holding up my end of our relationship.
Could you give a more specific example about that? Because this is a really important point.
The most obvious example, group projects, where there were some classes where we did group homework assignments or group programming assignments, and there were definitely times where I was not holding up my end of the group. I was letting other people do the work for me.
Why?
To be honest.
Why?
A lot of it was because I didn't understand what was going on, and at that point I was too afraid to ask questions. I wasn't super motivated to do it. I kind of thought I would just get by. My mentality was more about getting through it and getting it over with, instead of really committing to learning about it. And a lot of that was because I wasn't passionate about what I was learning.
So there's the emotional part, and that was the fear you had inside about people seeing at some level that you weren't really good at this. The biological, psychological part of it was, my understanding as a school psychologist, your brain is built to be more of a left brain learner, which is very language dominated, which is typically writers or debaters or lawyers. And here you are in a visual spatial major, engineering. One reason you were confused in the classes was because you didn't know how to learn this material. It was actually a real struggle for you because it was opposite your learning style, the way your brain was built. It makes sense you weren't super interested in this material. But on top of that, you emotionally had this idea of just let me get through it, which is a less conscious decision from insecurity. So what was going on inside of you, there were multiple pieces that were happening at the same time. One of the conscious decisions you made was to go into therapy again. But even during therapy, you were on the fence of making conscious decisions and less conscious decisions, because there were moments when you were facilitated more awareness of a step to take inside with your operating system in a particular situation, you would run with it. You would decide on your own, I'm going to go out and apply this. And you would come back and you would say, this is what I learned. In other moments where you were resistant and dragging your feet. But over time, the more mental health you've cultivated, the more you've come to understand conscious decision making. You're more and more independently doing it yourself because you have more awareness how and why to do it. You just gave a beautiful example of there's a human being deciding whether to make a conscious or not conscious decision. A metaphor for your example is the child not wanting to take their medicine. But then there are ramifications that radiate out from those decisions. A metaphor is that child does not take the medicine, that child does not get better. The people around that child are going to start suffering because they have to put more care into taking care of the child, or they're feeling heartsick that the child is getting sicker and sicker. And you're saying in your example was this less conscious decision you made about your major in the end impacted your peers, because when you'd be in groups with them, they were having to do more work in the group because the way you were making your decisions, you weren't really functioning in the group. So that's a really important part to understand about conscious decision making. It does affect the people around us, whether we realize it or not. And hopefully we listen to our heart, we listen to our conscience, and we say, this does matter. Again, a conscious decision. We could make an unconscious decision from the personal, say, I don't really care if it affects them or not. In the end, we're not listening to our conscience. We're not listening to our authentic self or innate wisdom inside. When we are from insecurity saying, I don't really care, we're hurting ourselves in those moments too.
This is also reminding me of the point you made at the beginning of this episode about, as a mental health counselor, how much you've seen patients improve tenfold once they understand and make more conscious decisions. Because I was seeing, it's kind of a domino effect. I made this one less conscious decision about which major to pick. I committed to it, and then the problems in my life just kept happening.
Piling up. You kept feeling more and more terrible inside.
Yeah.
Your mental health, number one, it wasn't great to begin with, but it was deteriorating over time because of the demands that were being placed on you, your level of awareness, how to navigate it, and it literally you were falling apart inside psychologically. Although the way you would carry this distress, it wasn't necessarily evident to the outside. In moments when you're not talking and I ask you what's going on, and then I find the distress you're in, some people, they can externalize their distress and you'll see them get more angry or more combative. That's a better thing because you know that they're distressed. Someone like yourself who would internalize your distress, the people who do that, the suffering's really happening on the inside and the outside doesn't really know what's going on. And all of a sudden, someone like yourself potentially collapses at some point psychologically in some way. The maximum magnification of that is something like suicide. Something less magnified is self-harming or drinking alcohol more or doing drugs more. It's when it's internalized like that, people don't really know what's going on or that you need help. You've heard me say it out loud, speak out loud, what's going on. That's how someone can know what you're going through or connect with you or encourage you or be there for you or some version of that. So we're going from simpler to more and more complex.
Yeah.
So now it makes sense to go even a little more next level with conscious decision making, knowing when you're doing the right thing versus what you want to do or what you're comfortable with or conventional wisdom. Ellie, you were talking about making medical decisions with this genetic revision the women in your family have been experiencing for generations. So could you please elaborate before learning this science, three principles psychology versus now with a deeper understanding about conscious decision making?
Yes. For listeners, if this is your first time tuning in, I've talked about this in the past, but I carry a revision on my BRCA gene, and this is something that a lot of women in my family have had. Pretty much everyone on my maternal side of the family has BRCA.
A revision with BRCA, because
Yeah.
don't we all have BRCA?
Yes, yeah.
It's just your BRCA is different than my BRCA.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've been surrounded by breast cancer for my whole life. A lot of breast cancer, other types of cancer. That's just been a very big part of my life growing up. And in my senior year, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. This is when she told me that mutations on the BRCA gene are something that our family carries. From where I was understanding at the time, my response to that was fear. And so I'd be very afraid of BRCA. I, at that time of my life, decided I didn't want to know if I had it or not. And I would make up these stories about dying when I was in college and dying young and all this really scary stuff.
And this was happening inside. No one knew.
Yeah.
You didn't tell anybody you were doing this.
Yeah.
You weren't talking about it. This is something.
My family wasn't really talking about it a lot either. It was mentioned, I remember we were like at lunch or something, and it was mentioned to me very briefly, and there wasn't a lot of guidance or conversation. It was, this is something that exists, and it's your choice to get tested or not. It's the decision that I made from fear about BRCA was to not get tested. That it was better to not know if I had it, not live with that, what I believed at the time was like a burden of knowing I had BRCA. And so I went to college, I started mental health counseling again, and BRCA and cancer wasn't even on the top of my mind when I started therapy. But as I worked more with a counselor who understood conscious decision making and understood through principles psychology, gradually I began to, I guess, re-understand my relationship with BRCA and what the right thing to do was and how to make a more conscious decision about taking care of my physical health. And so I got to a point where I eventually did get tested for BRCA, and this decision came from a very secure place. It wasn't because I was hoping to not have it. It wasn't because I was hoping for a specific result. I just genuinely was curious and interested and open to understanding and answering this question of if I have BRCA or not. And so that was a very stark upgrade that I experienced in my life, going from a scared, worried state and making decisions about my medical health from fear to now having the ability to go into this medical circumstance, making much more conscious decisions and more proactively understanding how my body is built without fear or judgment or anxiety.
If I could take a moment to simplify what you were doing inside, just so our listeners know the simplicity of this. When I hear Ellie speak, when she first would hear about the possible BRCA mutation within her, it was more a closed mind to learn about it, to get tested for it, to speak about it in depth with anybody.
It was that first layer of I don't want to do it that we were talking about before.
Right. From the personal, I don't want to do it, which means it's a limited understanding. It's a subjective understanding. The feeling inside is insecure or closed off or almost like you can't make me do it. But it was from fear that I don't want to become more aware. I don't want to know what really is going on. Later on, over time, as Ellie learned to use her operating system more consciously, more specifically the power of thought, it's what made sense to her from an open mind, a receptive mind. It turned into being curious. Like, it makes sense. I understand this about myself. And even as I'm saying it, can you hear how much lighter inside that is? The feeling is lighter inside. That's an open mind. It's like you've opened the door to a dark room and you're letting the sun or the light come in, and you can feel it. Ellie, were you told to go get the test, or did the outside tell you to get the test, or was it coming from the inside, something you were seeing and understanding from the inside, choices you were making independently with your operating system?
No, it was definitely coming from the inside. I remember the decision came from a process of understanding conscious decision making. I remember in counseling sessions, we were mostly understanding where my fear was coming from, the backstory for all of that, the ways I was using my mind, and the fears that I was not really communicating with the world before this. It was understanding conscious decision making, what that means, why it's important, how to do it, with a provider that was specifically focused on understanding conscious decision making. They were able to more proactively guide me to understand this. And then it was also just understanding at a basic level what it means to proactively take care of your health, how to do that, why it's important, which is another form of conscious decision making. So the focus on of our sessions wasn't should I get tested or not. It was more the decisions I was making before. I wasn't getting the full picture. I wasn't seeing the full picture. And so through therapy, through counseling, I was understanding how to see the full picture more, what the full picture looks like, and then making a decision from that place.
So it brings us back to that metaphorical visual of the wheel. Mm-hmm. In the middle of the wheel was, what do I do about a possible BRCA revision inside? Each spoke was understanding at new levels another piece of that. For example, what you were doing inside with thought in response to what you understood about BRCA, or what you experienced in the past when you were in high school or freshman year of college. It was looking at each spoke and you seeing new levels of awareness about those areas, and that is seeing the full picture. So it was a lot of work in a good way, because as it was happening, you were healing, you were becoming lighter inside. There was a lot you were understanding or realizing and letting go of. So in the end, you decided to go get the test.
Yeah.
You were in a place inside living at a greater level of consciousness where you were ready to address it. Yeah. Whatever was going to happen, it's called at a higher level of consciousness regarding the whole idea of having a BRCA revision. One of the things that's important to talk about is when we have any kind of illness or possible illness or injury, or even something genetic, when we reach out to the medical community, they are an important resource. They have invested in learning a lot of scientific knowledge about that thing. Ellie and I thought it was important to at least touch upon the role of a medical provider when you're going to them for health issues. Ellie, maybe if we start with an example where you've been taking the steps to get a mammogram as a next step in taking care of your body and understanding the current level of health within your body. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it eventually became clear to me after I got my results that I do have the BRCA revision. It clicked into place for me to get a mammogram. It was something that I had a gut feeling about, and then after I reflected on it more, I began to see more of the full picture of why my gut was telling me to get a mammogram. And to put that very simply right now, the reasoning to get a mammogram for me was that pretty much all of college I was smoking, I was drinking, I was not eating very well, I was super anxious, I was super depressed. I was basically doing everything that a doctor will tell you not to do if you want to reduce your risk of developing cancer. So I had all these very high risk activities in my past, plus this knowledge that I now have a revision on my genes that makes it more likely to develop cancer. It made sense for me to get a mammogram to get a baseline of where my health is at. So I scheduled a meeting with a doctor in the cancer genetics department at a hospital, and as soon as I walked in, she said, "You're not getting a mammogram." This is before she asked me any questions, before we understood why I even came in to get a mammogram. She made the decision for me just by looking at how old I was. And that's been a very consistent response that I've gotten as I've been on this journey to get a mammogram. I've gotten responses like, "You're too young to worry about this. We don't give mammograms to people because they're anxious about cancer," or "Insurance won't pay for it, so you're not going to get one." So it's just a lot of limited conversation, no question asking, and then also assuming where I'm coming from. So it's not really a collaborative process that I've been experiencing. It's been the decision is being made for me.
While there is no doubt that a doctor has done a lot of studying about the science of the body or the particular area of the body that they specialize in or the particular illness they specialize in. But here's the bottom line. It is in the best interest of every doctor to start learning at next levels about the operating system inside, how it works, and how to make conscious decisions. That is very different than learning academic knowledge. When you're talking about an illness or a part of the body, that's all academic knowledge. The thing is you're using mind, thought, consciousness to learn that knowledge. And as Ellie had pointed out before, even in deciding in that major, to take medicine to the next level. And this is something that has been looked into a great deal. How do we make healthcare more affordable? An essential way is we invest on the inside of the medical providers. Typically, the investments have been on the outside, research into diseases, equipment, hospitals, community mental health centers. The area that we've missed that is so critical to upgrade to next level patient care and at the same time is reducing healthcare costs, is the providers learn at next levels about the very thing they're using inside as they are providing patient care. Ellie's giving a graphic example of, yes, these doctors, most likely that she's been talking to, have a lot of academic knowledge, but she's pointing out they could be using their mind much more consciously in important ways. The example is Ellie is understanding from clarity, from realizations, from innate wisdom. It is best and right she gets a mammogram. That's coming from the inside. And the doctors have been memorizing and believing that a mammogram isn't needed until 25, and she's 23. That's investing into a thought without really understanding what you're doing. It's conventional wisdom. Oh, we don't give mammograms until a patient is 25. They have this thought in their head that they're believing is true, that mammograms don't happen until 25. Or they have a thought in their head that they're believing is true, that Ellie is nervous and that's why she wants to get the mammogram. That is a lower level of self-awareness, psychological awareness. That is separate than understanding the academic knowledge that they've invested in around the body or the illness. It is critical. This is how mistakes are made. This is how disease are missed, or this is where patient care has been at a lower level. Any doctor that goes in there with an open, empty mind, it's called a beginner state of mind, a receptive state of mind, no prior convictions, beliefs that they're investing inside of their head, and they can have a conversation with her and genuinely ask her questions. What are you seeing? What's going on? Where is this decision coming from? This is ultimate patient care. They're listening with an open mind. They're developing the relationship from a more conscious, healthy place inside, using their operating system more consciously. Anyone listening with an open mind will understand that Ellie is seeing spot on what her body needs. She needs to be persistent. She needs to be determined. Whoever she's scheduling this, speak from innate wisdom, and it has nothing to do with the outside, the demographic that she is 23 years old. That is the outside. It's irrelevant. It's where is she seeing from inside? Any medical providers are going to know that is by asking her questions with an open, receptive state of mind. This is one reason Ellie has made so much progress in mental health counseling is this is the state of mind. Often, this is where her mental health counseling has originated from. Where is she coming from? What is the source? What is she seeing? It is critical that medical providers start investing in at next levels this knowledge. They use their mind more consciously to develop the relationship with their patient, to understand where the patient is seeing from, and to realize inside what are best next steps for their treatment. And what happens is your awareness is spot on sooner, faster. This is where a lot of waste or mistakes is going to just start falling away.
I did want to tie this to a more general example that I was just reading about. It's documented that people that are in a higher weight demographic oftentimes get misdiagnosed, or they will come into a doctor's office with a specific concern and it'll be attributed to their weight, but later on in a lot of cases it's discovered that there is something else going on, whether that person was spot on with their initial judgment or understanding, or something else was realized later. I've seen other stories related about like women that go to doctors' offices and their concerns are blown off as like menstrual cramps or something happening with their hormones, but later on it's something serious.
They're using the power thought. And if you talk to the doctor about their understanding of thought, it's low. What they're doing is they're listening to and believing conventional wisdom. For example, conventional wisdom is this is happening because the woman is overweight. That's a belief. That's a subjective level of understanding. And what makes it conventional wisdom is a large part of the collective have decided to believe this thought, this idea, this subjective level of understanding. Yes, the collective might be in agreement about this thing, but they're off base in understanding this topic or how to navigate this particular thing. A number of years ago, had a mammogram that led to another mammogram that led to a microscopic biopsy that led to an invasive biopsy. In the end, I learned there was no cancer. Once that whole process was completed, which was fairly lengthy, the breast surgeon kept trying to convince me to go on a common drug that they prescribe for women to prevent breast cancer. There is this conventional wisdom. The next step is you go on this strong medication and you're on it for some lengthy period of time. After you went through this long process of procedures to learn, is that cancer or not? I can see that being potentially as a best next step for a woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer. I saw from innate wisdom, I saw from clarity, from security, from a grounded place inside, I did not need this medicine. I was very clear that I did not have breast cancer. Why would I take a drug to prevent breast cancer when I didn't have breast cancer in the first place? I'd say to the breast surgeon, I appreciate the information. I see that I don't need it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. The next thing is my primary care physician schedules an appointment with me, and he's basically telling me he disagrees with me and that it's important I go on this medication. I said to him, I so appreciate the follow-up. I so appreciate your concern. I could also tell he was coming from a lower level of awareness. He was coming from leaving this idea and worry. I had knowledge about how I was using my mind, and I was getting glimmers of how they were using their mind. And I was very clear I was using my mind more consciously. I had an inner knowing I was doing the right thing. This is the flip side of what Ellie's talking about. From conventional wisdom, they're saying her demographic, the outside, her being under 25, is why she doesn't get the mammogram. On my flip side, I go through this long process of these tests to determine what is it they're seeing on the initial 2 mammograms, which led to an invasive breast biopsy. From conventional wisdom, they're telling me to go on this medication. Ellie's coming from innate wisdom. It's clicking in her head. It's the right thing to do. From clarity, she sees to get this mammogram. I see from clarity, from an inner knowing, from innate wisdom inside, it doesn't make sense for me to go on this medication. This is to understand everybody has innate wisdom inside. It is a essential feature of mind, the living energy inside. Like all living things, it has an intelligence in it. It's our inner guidance system. It's where realizations comes from. It's where a gut feeling comes from. It's where an inner knowing comes from. When we're seeing from that place inside, we're seeing spot on what we need. It's really important people, the collective, at next levels learns how to listen. Listen in alignment with the way our operating system was designed. And it's listening beyond the words. It's the opposite of literal listening. It's the opposite of believing. It's also learning to listen to that inner guidance system inside, which is listening beyond any memories that are popping up, any insecure thoughts that are popping up, any insecure thinking that's happening, or busy-minded thinking. Metaphorically, that could be called the bad wolf. It's listening beyond it to the good wolf, which is the quieter, the calmer, potentially less obvious guidance system inside, that quieter feeling, that calmer feeling. That's feeding the good wolf. That's seeing from your authentic self. We have big decisions in our life, such as medical decisions, such as deciding our major in college, or deciding what job to take, or when to leave a job, or who to marry. But to understand, we're making important decisions every moment in live time, and that is what thought to listen to inside of our head. How to use our operating system in live time. These micro decisions, we're doing them every single moment. They're important decisions because they lead to the perspective that we end up investing in about the live context. That is a level of awareness. That is a level of understanding. To have an inner knowing, what level of understanding to listen to make decisions from. If we decide to believe a level of understanding that's coming from anxiety, that's coming from fear, that's coming from insecurity, and our decision comes from that, we are heading down the wrong road. We are making a mistake. It can be a micro mistake. It could be a huge mistake. To understand as quickly as possible we just made a mistake, that's another decision. To take the steps inside to see more of the facts, to right ourselves, to make a more conscious decision. That makes all the difference in the world. We don't have to keep making so many mistakes. There's decisions as far as when we make a mistake. Are we willing to understand the mistake? Are we willing to learn more? Are we willing to take responsibility for it? Or are we just going to keep investing in that mistake and keep going down the wrong road? Moment to moment, we're making decisions what thought to believe in our head, who to believe on the outside. For example, some people can think they're powerless around doctors, that they have less power. That thought is a level of misunderstanding, because everybody is very powerful. It's understanding your power at next levels, and it's using it consciously. You have as much power as the person next to you, and that is mind, thought, consciousness inside. That brings us to our next and final topic on knowing the right thing to do. That's being part of the collective, Ellie.
Yeah.
What does understanding your power inside have to do with being part of a collective and how much power you have within that collective?
What I'm seeing is that it can be very easy from a less conscious place to get caught up in what others are doing. It can get very easy to get caught up in believing that the majority knows what's right. It can be less scary from a less conscious place. It can be comforting to be with the group. It can feel safe. I think it's really important to understand with this idea of conscious decision making that when you are seeing from a conscious place, you are doing the right thing for yourself and for the people around you. One modern example that I have is that I had a conversation with a friend the other day about social media and social media algorithms, and his perspective was social media companies are predatory in how they can make people addicted to their platforms and how they can make their algorithms so persuasive and catered to a user that a person really has no power to say no to opening up their phone and going on social media and spending hours scrolling through it. Where I was coming from, where I was understanding, is that the decision to open your phone, to go onto this app, is a decision that you are making. Without understanding how decisions are made or how to make conscious decisions, it can feel like you have no choice in that situation, that you have to go with what these companies want or what's cool, what's popular to do, which is going on social media, being on social media. But it is your decision to keep the app on your phone, to log in every day, to go through it. That's one example that illustrated the sense of powerlessness that I think people can convince themselves of, or believe that they are powerless, believe that they don't have agency in the things that they do and how they spend their time.
That is an excellent example of using the power thought and not understanding that power inside. Using it at a lower level of consciousness. What level do they understand? They are using their power, mind, thought, consciousness, and their free will to push that button and go on to social media. This is coming from inside and how I'm choosing to use my power. The outside is the social media. The outside is the digital device. Inside is mind, thought, consciousness. Inside is the power thought. Inside are the thoughts or level of understanding that is being created with one's power, because his level of understanding was low, because his decision was less conscious. He was investing in a thought. Something outside of him has more control over his behavior and his decisions than him. That's a misunderstanding of how we work inside. When your friend was talking about social media having control and being less powerful or being powerless, that is a thought. That is an imaginary idea that that person was creating inside their head with their power called thought. To understand it is an illusionary idea that they are creating and they're experiencing in their head. That is a greater level of self-awareness. That is a greater level of mental health. That is understanding more the power thought inside, how it works, and that they're using it. That's just one thing, creating the thought. Next step is either listening to the thought or believing the thought, or staying focused on whatever was going on in live time. That is another micro decision that people are doing in live time. That person is using their power to believe the thought he or people are powerless over social media algorithms. Well, your friend is very powerful. The bottom line is for him to understand he was using his power to invest in an illusionary idea that he was powerless. And it's not even the ideas in his head. It's the believing it. It's the buying into it less consciously. That's a less conscious decision, that he is choosing to believe this made-up imaginary thought, this subjective level of awareness. It is human beings individually using their power less consciously that the collective starts copying each other's behavior or believing each other's thoughts, or believing the thought that the problem is the social media algorithm. The more they invest at next levels in understanding thought and how they're using it and how it works and what they can be doing when they're experiencing these thoughts, people are going to listen to their innate wisdom in live time, and they're going to make more conscious decisions whether to go on that social media, how long to go on that social media, how to navigate that social media. Your thoughts on what I'm saying?
I had a mini thought about an example that ties in the medical discussion we had and this current topic about the collective. And what was becoming apparent to me as we were talking about this was I've been seeing a lot of doctors. I've had quite a few appointments talking about BRCA, and there's a statistic that I hear a lot, which is the statistic that 60% of people-ish with BRCA develop breast cancer in their lives. I remember the first time I heard the statistic, my genetic counselor was positioning this fact in a fearful way, where she was saying, like, BRCA is a very serious thing. It can be very scary because 60% of people that have it develop breast cancer. I started asking her questions just in the interest of genuinely understanding what she was saying. I was asking her where this number come from, what was this test that was conducted? I'm really interested in understanding this test. And she said it came from a national board, some research study that they proposed. And then I asked her, did this statistic account for smokers, people that drink a lot? What demographic was this statistic coming from? She couldn't give an answer for that. What I'm understanding now, as we're talking about the collective and your level of understanding, was that she was seeing the statistic that 60% of people with BRCA develop breast cancer, and instead of understanding that statistic at a deeper level to more accurately inform what she was telling to her patients, she was just believing what a collective posited as the truth. Because what I was trying to understand was how many of the women that were tested in this study were at higher risk of developing cancer for lifestyle choices, because that can be a big cause of. I had a lot of smokers in my family, and that's what I understand is part of where a lot of their cancer diagnoses came from.
If you want to take that a step further, what is behind them smoking cigarettes? That's a level of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Those are decisions. How conscious are those decisions? Sometimes people smoke because they're feeling anxious, because they're feeling stressed. So they pick up the cigarette to distract themselves or to alleviate the stressful feeling inside. That's a lower level of mental health. Sometimes these behaviors, these less healthy behaviors, are ways to alleviate stress inside.
Mm-hmm.
In the case, more and more people study at next levels, mind, thought, consciousness, and cultivate more mental health, it is possible that these high-risk behaviors that are leaned on, that are resorted to alleviate insecurity inside, a busy mind, stress, and they take the steps inside to self-regulate, to let their mind clear and calm down from facts about how mind, thought, consciousness works. It is possible some of these high-risk behaviors, and I'm even say it's going to be likely because I've seen it in patients where they stop doing these high-risk behaviors because they're experiencing less stress inside because how they're more consciously using their mind.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go to the next level. When we experience stress, our heart rate is elevated, we have tension in our body, our breathing is more shallow. We could go to next levels in experiencing healthier psychological states, which then would lead to healthier biological states, where now at a whole nother level, we're eliminating or reducing very serious illnesses such as cancer. I'm not saying it's going to eliminate all cancer, but it is possible, even more than possible, likely, that some of these cancers that have been happening could greatly reduce. Even if they've reduced some, that would still be progress. It is important that these studies look at this at a finer grade level and not just clump all of this together, that it's a result of the BRCA revision that this cancer's happening. It is important that you ask questions so your level of awareness could increase inside, so that you could make more conscious decisions from innate wisdom how to navigate this revision that you have inside. And that is a great example how she was exposed to this material. I don't know if it was in a scientific study or in one of her textbooks. Because it was in one of those places, she just started, it sounded like she just started believing this thought that was written on some page somewhere, when she could have been using her mind more consciously to understand it at next levels.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm also seeing bigger picture, at least for my whole experience with BRCA, the statistic or whatever information that the under 25, you don't get a mammogram, wherever that idea came from, whatever statistics informed that guideline, I'm really curious. What I'm understanding is that statistics can be useful tools to provide guidance, potentially to inform a provider for things to look out for things to ask questions about. I'm also understanding that from my experiences, these statistics were being used as absolute truths without having a full picture of where these statistics come from or if they're applicable to every scenario. What I was thinking when you were talking was the whole under 25 thing that I faced a lot, where is this under 25, is this like a measurement that was determined from statistical generalizations, or is there a concrete reason for why people under 25 in all cases cannot get a mammogram? It's like it
doesn't even make sense that it is that much of a hard and fast rule, because that is going to lend itself to potentially miss possible cases that have already started, which it's like psychologically turning a blind eye to what could be happening inside of one particular patient.
Yeah.
That is not patient-centered care. That's not good health care. You gave a wonderful example that the statistics are on the outside. The books, the scientific books, the research papers, the numbers, they're all on the outside. How is the medical provider using their mind on the inside in understanding that statistic on the outside, that medical book, that policy, that procedure? When you were saying, are they just believing it black and white? That is a very lower level of awareness of inside how they're using their operating system. When they're asking questions, when they're allowing themselves to have clicks inside, that's using mind, thought, consciousness inside much more consciously to understand the outside, the statistics, the policy, the procedures. When we reach out to the medical community, they are an important resource. They have invested in learning a lot of scientific knowledge about that thing. But it's also important to understand they provide cures. The healing actually happens inside, and it originates from mind. Mind is the power inside. It's the entity that allows us to create a new cell every 22 hours. It's the entity inside that powers our immune system, or powers our blood flow or our oxygen flow, that powers our heartbeat. Mind is the entity inside that actually has the ability to heal our body. For us to understand at greater and greater levels what it is, how it works, and to more consciously work in alignment with it, we can experience more biological and psychological healing inside. Ellie, this has been a enlightening and interesting first mental health crash course, knowing you are doing the right thing. It was apparent to Ellie and I that it was important to do this topic, especially with what is going on in our country right now. It's well known during this time. There's been a lot been going on with our federal government and how citizens and residents in the United States of America have been responding to it, and even across the globe. Knowing you are doing the right thing at next levels, at greater levels, is incredibly important in sustainably resolving in optimal ways what has been going on within the United States of America. How it's not only been affecting people at the national level, but the international level. I am Faith Escudero, your host of Got Your Back podcast.
I'm Ellie, your junior host.
We look forward to continuing the conversation and you joining us, and this awareness, these new mental health facts spreading among us. Bye for now.